Understanding is the solution. Introduction. My name is Cengiz. I was born on 29th November 1952 in Tepebasi, Istanbul. My sister, Oya, was born 15 months before me. It was surprising for my father to hear the news, and I was told that he dropped the phone because he had been hoping the arrival of a son. When I came into this world, my father faced a different predicament. I was so big that my mother couldn't deliver me naturally, and the doctors informed my father that it was too late for a cesarean section, and it was not possible. He had to choose between my mother and me. It was clear that he had underestimated my determination, as despite the numerous challenges, he made the decision to ensure my mother's survival. After enduring several hours of labor, she successfully delivered me, a healthy son weighing 5'6" kg. 4 years later, with a lot less drama, my younger brother Emin was born and our family was complete. Tepebasi, where I lived until I was 11 years old, was an eclectic mix of cultures and ideas. It was a blend of old and new where various religions existed side by side. Everyone was living their own life and was respectful to each other. As far as we were aware at that time, there was no racial or religious discrimination. If it existed, I wasn't aware. Nevertheless, at the age of 11, our family relocated to Murder, a different neighborhood. In this new environment, our neighbors held greater influence and were more conservative. As children, we were not particularly aware of these differences, but our mother underwent a significant transformation. She began wearing a veil and started the practices of Islam. I finished secondary school at the age of 16, but my father wanted me to continue my studies. Turkey, at that time, was a political mess. Students from the left and students from the right of politics were killing each other in university. Despite my father's protestations, I refused to continue studying. He wanted me to get a good education because he hadn't, but some of my uncles had. One was my mother's brother, Cengiz, who spent 24 years in Ankara, the political capital of Turkey. He was in a group of officials from different cities in Turkey who represented the interests of the people there, serving for 8 years as the Minister of Internal Affairs in Demirel Democratic Party. Although he became well-known and prominent in national politics later, at that time, he was serving as the deputy mayor of Erzurum, a large city where my mother originated. Her father, Abdurrahman Karaka, had been the mayor. Another of her brothers, my uncle Sevket, had done very well at school and was now the manager of a local bank. Both earned good salaries, and this was what my father hoped for me to eventually achieve. My grandfather passed away 2 months prior to my father's birth. He was fighting in the First World War and was in Ataturk's personal group of fighters when he was killed in action. Because that happened, my father and older brother were accepted to work in the kitchen in the Dolmabahce Palace where Ataturk lived, which is also known as the White Palace. His older brother was already working 7 years in the palace kitchen, and after primary school, when my father was about 12 or 13, he went to work with his brother. During that time, he got to know Ataturk very well. The great man would enjoy drinking raki every night and often would find himself in the kitchens with my father late in the evening. He would some days come to cook food after his working day. During this time, my father learned from Ataturk how to prepare beans with lamb meat the way he loved it. My father learned so well that whenever Ataturk wanted to enjoy his favorite meal, it was often my father who would prepare it for him. My father had some pictures of Ataturk in his gardens, taken during this period. In 1938, when Ataturk passed away from cirrhosis of the liver, caused by all the raki he loved so much, my father was almost in his 30s and already an accomplished chef. Because he was no longer needed in the palace, he was sent to work with a man I only know as Ilias, but who was the most famous chef in Turkey at that time. When the Istanbul Hilton opened in 1955, I was just a baby and my father was selected as one of the 3 chefs by Conrad Hilton. My father became such a well-known chef that he was selected to represent Turkey several times in what was then the world's most prestigious culinary competition, the Zurich Escoffier Grand Prix. By this time, my father was also earning a similar income to his brother-in-laws, the government minister, and the banker. So, my father, without a university education, but with training from a great chef, as well as a philosophy created by spending so much time with great men, was doing very well. I thought I might be able to do it good too and didn't need a university education to do it. My mother's youngest brother, Sevdet Karaka, was a man I admired very much. Like my father, he didn't study, but he was extremely interested and active in fashion. He had built a business on Beyaglu Mesritay Caddesi, the fashion center of Istanbul. It was a factory called Karaka Confeksiyon. The factory specialized in designing, drawing, and producing some of the country's top fashion shops at the time. He worked with all the major fashion brands such as Nail Yurjukal, Faze, and Sedum. These names, some of which are long forgotten, were the icons of the time, and I was keen to become involved in such a wonderful trade. My father, though, had different ideas. Through his many contacts in Turkey's elite society, he found me a job in the man truck factory. Because of his and therefore my relationship with Mr. Semi, the owner, they treated me like a VIP, introducing me to all the managers in many different offices, but finally took me to the gearbox repair section in the building to the left of the entrance of the big factory. They told me I would start here and learn everything. My father had planned for me to go there, learn a trade, and become something I didn't want to be. I went, but resigned after only 15 days, earning the wrath of my father, but the support of my uncle, who offered me a place in his clothes factory. To this day, I'm happy with that decision. Life wasn't as easy as I had thought. I needed to prove myself to my uncle and my workmates, and I certainly didn't get an easy ride. What my uncle didn't know was that I was secretly going back to the factory after hours and learning to sew on the machines, as this was not allowed by my uncle. I studied drawing and pattern design. I learned how to iron and sew. I needed to learn cutting and finishing and understand the manufacturing processes as well as quality control. Within 2 years, I had covered it all. After 2 years, I told my uncle I wanted to know more about selling fashion in the shops. So, he introduced me to Hakan and Evan, both famous shops on the most popular shopping street, and I spent some time working in both of them. On seeing that I had learned so much and become so accomplished in the industry, I found that I had earned my father's trust. My father, who as we know was well connected, and had started to believe I had some promise in the industry, then introduced me to the owner of Vako, Mr. Vitali Hako. To say that Vako was a shop would be an understatement. The name Vako and fashion in Turkey were synonymous. It was the largest department store in Turkey with 7 floors of fashion. Although there was only one shop in Istanbul, it has since become one of the largest Turkish fashion retailers with many outlets throughout Turkey and some in other countries too. Getting this job was a lot more complicated than it seemed. I needed an introduction to Vitali Hako, the owner. He interviewed all the staff in his head office, which is in a factory, and they not only needed to come from a good family, but they also needed an excellent work ethic and a solid reputation to get a job. My interview lasted more than half an hour and I was offered a job. I believe it was because of who I am and my experiences, not because my father managed all the major weddings and parties and knew Mr. Hako personally, nor because my father recommended me. By the time I was 20 years old, I was enjoying being a part of the fashion industry in Turkey, and from selling men's clothes on the 4th floor of Vako, I moved to be in charge of 6 fashion salespeople. I was learning a lot. But Hidayat Pellet offered me a role in his next movie. Hidayat was a particularly good friend of my uncle Sevdet, and in Turkey, he was a well-known film producer for Pellet Films. This felt like a more interesting lifestyle than working in Vako. My uncle and Hidayat had served in the military together, and then Hidayat traveled to the US after their service. His 1971 movie Canli Define had a real Turkish movie star, Ahmet Mekan, in the lead role, but I was also in the movie as a supporting actor. Acting wasn't a full-time job for me, but I was good at it and was invited to play a role in the second movie Pellet Films would make once Canli Define was launched. I can't remember the name of the second movie. It was something to do with the streets of Istanbul or something like that, but I don't remember because after the work on the second movie, about 2 weeks into filming, I left the set. Pellet didn't want to pay me, so I walked out, and that was the end of my acting career. All boys in Turkey needed to sign up for military service, and being free from the film set allowed me to do that. That also didn't last long. My national service time had arrived, but I am not a person who wants to serve in the military. I don't ever want to shoot or kill another human. I guess I could be called a conscientious objector or a pacifist. I was very much against war. I found out that the military doctor knew my father. In my first few days, he asked me to come to the medical office and asked me if I was the son of the chef Dana. I am, and so, I don't know if my father ever knew I did this. I explained my views to the doctor, who then found a reason to declare me unfit to serve. So, after only 15 days, I was dismissed from the army and I was free. I wasn't an actor anymore. I was about 20 years old, and so I was able to do whatever I wanted. It was 1973. As a young man, I had my own brand, Pantaloons Cengiz, making designer trousers. I had to explore more of the world in order to gain more experiences and popular culture fashion ideas. It was the Beatle, Rolling Stones, and hippies era, and I was also under a lot of pressure because of religion. My mother and many of her friends became deeply religious, and even my friends of my own generation were putting me under pressure. If you are a Christian or any other religion and you don't hold to your religion, it's okay. But if you don't believe in religion, people think there is something wrong. Pressure from all sides made me want to do something different. I felt that I had seen all of Turkey and knew Istanbul too well. I didn't like the political situation at the time and felt compelled to get more experience. So, I went on a European tour with my friend Levent. We had planned to go to London and travel by ferry from Ostend in Belgium. But when we arrived in Dover, we were taken into a room by the immigration officers and interviewed for a long time. They felt we were spies or some kind of threat, and so we were eventually put back on the boat and returned to Ostend. I have since visited the UK many times. We were planning to head back to Istanbul, and since it was a night ferry, we decided not to bother going to bed. We went to a discotheque instead, and we met two nice girls. They were Dutch and were traveling to Holland the next day, so Levent and I traveled with them. Amsterdam in the early 70s was a wonderful place. I loved it and decided to stay longer. This was a time I got very lucky. I was in a coffee shop and met another Turkish guy, Adem Sahin, who was moving from a small workshop to a larger shop and didn't need the small shop anymore. He gave me the opportunity to use the workshop, which was like a small factory, and pay the rent when the income started to come in. Although I would often work with him and help him in some way, we didn't do much business together. I found good workers and better suppliers and negotiated better prices. Despite this, Adem and I remained great friends for many years. Using all the skills I'd learned from my uncle, and in a place where I didn't need to make immediate payments, I opened my first workshop in August 1974. In a brief period of time, I was making OEM about 2,000 pieces a week. Later, I started to make my own design with my own label and selling them in the fashion center in Amsterdam. It was an enjoyable time. I worked hard and made enough money for a reasonable lifestyle. During this time, I also met Maria Admiral, who would become my first wife within 2 years. It was a time of great freedom with income from the workshop, fashion designs being bought by some big names, and although I could never call myself rich, there was enough money to do what we enjoyed, which was traveling. We both loved the Canary Islands and went there 4 times in a brief period of time. Within a couple of years, we decided to sell what we had built in Holland and move to Gran Canaria. We stayed in Playa del Inglés, a beach that is still to this day renowned for being a young person's getaway. I negotiated for the purchase of a Wimpy bar there. Most English people of my generation and older will remember Wimpy bars. They were the competitors of McDonald's, with great burgers, French fries, and other meals which kids loved. But during the negotiations phase, the parent company declared bankruptcy, leaving me without a career. We focused on the fashion business, selling products made in my own workshop, and had several shops with my partner in Gran Canaria. However, after 4.5 years away, we returned to Holland, where I finally broke up with Maria. In 1983, I started a Dutch brand, Day by Day, which became a successful brand. And I had met Lisbeth in Gran Canaria. When I met her, she was working for KLM, the Royal Dutch Airlines, and enjoyed her job. We were together for 11 years. Lisbeth remains a great friend of mine to this day. Her brother Pieter had a son, Floris, who was a source of boundless joy to me. I was his favorite uncle, and he was my favorite nephew. Sometimes, when his parents would have a vacation, they would drop Floris and his dog to me to take care of them. Later, I started to produce in China and had been traveling a lot in China for production over the preceding 2 years. I realized that I could produce better products if I came to live in China. So in 2022, I moved to China. At that time, the opportunities were great. The suppliers and the staff were affordable and maintained high quality. In 2011, I met Laura and we married. Now we have 2 sons, Kublai and Attila. Later, I approached Floris with an offer to come and work with me. He had been a university student for more than 12 years and was ready for a new direction. Just like me when I was younger, he enjoys fashion much more than he enjoyed studying. We started with my brand, just me and mine, JMM. Later, we changed the brand name from JMM to Flores to make the brand from us together. To combine all my experiences with his young passion. Our brand Flores, which has become one of the most popular brands in Holland, selling in the best multi-label stores. In recent years, we have attended fashion exhibitions and have been selected as one of the most innovative contemporary brands in 2022. More than 50 years ago, when I started in this industry, we didn't think about the environment. No one did, but now I feel compelled to create products that respect nature. I've always been productive, always remained positive, and have always been a fighter. I'm still fighting and still positive. People do the wrong thing to me. I do my best not to get as angry or upset as I used to. When I make a mistake through my own inexperience, I take the lessons I've learned and I grow from that experience. Sometimes I lose myself in anger or frustration, and I turn to my God and apologize. I try to understand how I made the mistake and learn some truth. One of my ways of handling problems is to deal with them. I deal with the problem by not sleeping, analyzing the problem, talking and writing about it, and handling it before I allow myself to sleep. Sometimes this might be 1 or 2 days, and occasionally 1 or 2 years. I don't give it up easy, but it's how I manage things. If I have a problem, I won't sleep easy. I think it's what keeps me younger and what keeps me healthy. I honestly believe if I sleep on a problem or let it go, the problem will cause me health issues. So, an important part of my life is how I handle problems, always making sure the problem is resolved before I can feel peace. Throughout my life, I've had many occasions where I've gone several days without sleep, and I'm going to share some of them in the following pages. I've learned that we all make mistakes, but understanding that we do is the most important thing in life. What we don't understand is tiring. It causes us to age. What we do understand relaxes us, energizes us, and keeps us younger. I learned what empathy means. Empathy is the ability to feel ourselves in others and other environments without prejudice, to see things with their lives and thoughts, and to understand them without comparing with ourselves. Once you understand this well, it's much easier to make decisions and keep from getting angry. So, nowadays, I don't get so angry and the feeling is dealt with quicker than it used to be. The second most crucial point is to love ourselves. I realized long ago that I can't fool myself. I need to be a good person to be able to love myself, and if I can't love me, how can anyone else love me?
My background and experiences have taught me to believe in karma.
I'm convinced that we will all come face to face with what we have done in our lives. Several years ago, I drafted an article on this topic with the title, "Understanding is the Solution." Many good people have read this and told me I was right. It should be like that. People who saw themselves as superior and took advantage of the weaknesses of others didn't like what I had written, and some of them turned away from me. In life, we will always encounter people who belittle us, think of their own interests, look for what benefit they can gain by befriending us. Some of them are cunning and cordial. They appear to love us, but exploit our weaknesses to create more uncertainty, to use them to eliminate us. When we meet these kind of people, we shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't be angry. We learn from them, and this book is all about how we can survive by not losing ourselves in their games, by learning from their unwittingly given instructions, and how we take the greatest lessons in our lives by understanding what they do, why and how they do it so that we never lose to them, and in doing so, we empower ourselves. We will also meet some people who have gone through the experiences, some not so well, some like me in a much better way. What makes us is how we handle negative people and what happens when we cannot. Our understanding of simple solutions comes from these complexities. I've shared a little of my life so that the reader knows where I come from and who I am. We all have these experiences, as you will see when you read on. The following examples will help you see what this book is about. They're examples of how I relieve stress and understand my own environment. These are the experiences that led me to my philosophy and why I am where I am today. Several of my friends with similar philosophies agree with me and will write about their experiences. So, when you reach the end of this book, you can think of it as the start of a journey to understanding yourself. You can also understand the solutions to your own problems by writing about them just like I did. Understanding and maintaining clean karma in our lives can be complex. It requires a continuous process of learning, understanding, and improving our karma. Achieving a balance with our karma is a daily pursuit that not only contributes to our personal growth, but also keeps us young. It is through this balance that we find the energy necessary to navigate the various dimensions of our existence. This book is recounted from my memory. While I strive for accuracy and transparency, others involved may have their own perspectives. I'm open to discussing any discrepancies and even a polygraph if necessary.